You know the vibes. Welcome back to another episode of the Hoop Genius podcast brought to you by NBA 2K24. Make sure you get your copy in the description. Myself, Mamutsi, alongside me as always, three-time NBA champion. Sorry, the three-time NBA champion, Mr. BJ Armstrong. BJ, how have you been?
Oh, it's been great. Fantastic. Looking forward to seeing you this week
Mm-hmm.
in the great city of Indianapolis, the great state of Indiana.
But what do I need to pack?
Mo,
Is it going to be super cold?
it's going to be very, very cold. So get yourself ready.
Oh, man.
It's going to be very cold. Fabulous city. Good food, though. Good food there.
Yeah.
Good basketball.
Yep.
And you and I will be an all-star.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We will be. BJ will have a table ready at the club for an hour.
There must be another guy you'll be talking about.
You should know by now. I ain't talking about no damn guys when I pull up.
You're about 3 decades late to the party.
I'm gonna get you one day, OG. I'm gonna get you one day. But before we get to the basketball, did you enjoy the Super Bowl?
I did. I thought it was a great game to watch, very competitive. And Patrick Mahomes is just a terrific athlete, terrific quarterback.
Have you got an NBA comparison for me?
He's a generational talent. So, as far as comparing, I do not. However, he is a very special talent in his own way. And when you see generational talent, you don't compare him to, you'll see something for the first time. He's an interesting combination because he can make every throw. He manages the game beautifully, and he's a big man, right? He's big, and he's a unique player. But I can tell you this: there haven't been a lot of combinations with him. There hasn't been a lot of combinations.
The comparisons are good because when people don't know about a sport, so someone explained it to me, they were like, Patrick Mahomes is like the Steph Curry of NFL. I said, all right, cool.
No, this he is, he is as unique of a player that we've seen at his position because, we've seen Steph before. We just haven't seen it. In my opinion, we've seen Steph. We've seen a lot of great shooters, right? We've seen the Reggie Millers, the Ray Allens.
At the point guard position.
What makes it fascinating now is that there is no point guard position. They're all scorers. They're like scoring guards.
Yeah, but Reggie and Ray are much bigger than Steph.
Okay, what I mean by that is we've seen players that can shoot. We haven't seen a player that shoot the volume that he's shooting.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that before. Okay, now I would venture to say if Reggie Miller was playing in this era and Ray Allen was playing in this era, and there's been some players who could shoot. It's just that we've never seen a player shoot at this level with the volume. And I'm not taking away anyone, but there was just a different game back then.
Yeah.
That was a different game. So, but this kid here, he is just unique for what he does. Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if you can really compare, and I don't like comparing players anyway, but I would say this, like when you saw Shaq, you know what I mean? When you saw Wilt Chamberlain, I would assume for the first time, when you saw Michael Jordan, when you saw Magic Johnson, you go, oh, that's a generational talent. We'll see how great he is. When you start comparing him to like a Tom Brady, for instance, he's a little different than Tom Brady and Joe Montana and those guys, those names. So let's just watch him to see what he's going to be and admire him. But I would venture to say he probably could play in any era and he would figure it out. He's that good.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, my favorite part about the Super Bowl, BJ, is that when the Super Bowl finishes, everyone stops talking about that American football running around with their helmets, and now we can finally focus everyone's eyes on the basketball.
Okay.
We have the trade deadline. Your rule to start the season is you want to see 25 games to see how everyone fits in. After the trade deadline, how many games do you think it takes for things to get back to normal? Because the night before the trade deadline and the night after trade deadline, I don't really count them as real nights in the NBA because everyone's some like the Knicks had 8 healthy players. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of people are moving parts and unavailable and whatnot. So how long does it take for after the trade deadline for you to give an assessment of a team?
What normally happens is after All-Star break. That's when the coaches will have this little window of time to assess what they have and to figure out with these last 25 to 30 games what they're gonna need to happen in order to make this playoff push, right? Your Celtics are up like 4 or 5 games. Some teams are saying they'll start looking at like seedings to say who they think they could match up with. They will never admit that, but you start looking. If you're the second seed, you start looking at, who's 7. If you're 4, you're looking at 5. And for the most part, those 30 games will be played at a higher level because you have the teams now trying to get into the play-in. You got the teams trying to hang on to the, top 6 seeds. So these games will be played at a much higher level. So I expect them now to start playing every game as if they all matter, but now they'll be crucial and it'll be a lot more emphasis on these games, especially as they come down the home stretch.
Okay. Well, a team that's not going to be worried about who they're matching up seeding wise and what their team looks like is the Charlotte Hornets. Another season without the playoffs for the team in Charlotte. And today we got the news that Charlotte Hornets president of basketball operations, Mitch Kupchak, who was formerly with the Lakers, right? Is stepping down to become an organizational advisor, clearing the way for the franchise to begin an immediate search for a new head of basketball operations. What does this mean for the fans, BJ? Can you explain this to them?
What does this mean?
In terms of a head of basketball operations versus a GM versus what's he now, an organizational advisor, all these different names given to jobs.
Well, what traditionally happens is when you have new ownership or a new majority owner there in Charlotte, you'll start seeing things begin to reassess or reassign people who are under contract. I don't know if he's still under contract or not. And you'll start to bring in new people to lead an organization in the direction of the new leadership, or in this case, the new governor. So this is very common in the NBA. And, what direction are they going to take? Are they going to bring in experienced executives? Are they going to start fresh? Are they going to be, a team, that's going to look to build their team under what's the characteristics they'll try to do. So I think we have to wait and see that. I'm sure they have some people in mind that they would like to maybe interview, so forth and so on. But this is very common practice in the NBA, but more importantly, we'll see how it all works out, because in the end, you and I, by next year this time, we'll be able to assess what they knew and what they didn't know based on their record. So that's how it works.
Well, what they do have is LaMelo Ball locked up until 2029, Grant Williams, Brandon Miller, Nick Smith Jr. until 2027, and then a bunch of guys, Micic, Martin, Nick Richards, they come off the books in 2026. And then everyone else kind of expires either this season or next season. But if there is one person who can fix that team over there, he does join us on the podcast every Monday, and that's Mr. Scott Perry. So, BJ, who's the new owner of the Hornets?
Gabe, what's his name? Let me
Gabe Plotkin and Rick Schnell. Well, fellas, if you're listening, I'd recommend Scott Perry.
Yes. I mean, Scott would be, listen, Scott he's one of the premier executives in this league. And I'm not just saying that because he is a friend of the show. I mean, he's just very competent in what he's done. I mean, his track record speaks for itself. He's they won a championship there in Detroit He was part of the Oklahoma City Thunder when they drafted Kevin Durant and Jeff Green and all those guys. And
Look at what the Knicks
you
are
know,
doing now with the
look what the
foundations
Knicks
that
are
he built.
doing. The foundation, Julius Randle, and all those people came in on his clock. Mitchell Robinson, R.J. Barrett, so forth and so on. What he was able to do, he just understands this business and he understands the culture. But more importantly, he understands the people in the business. He understands what it takes to win. So, to anyone that's looking to rebuild or build or get an organization where it needs to be able to compete at a championship level, I would endorse Scott Perry every day of the week for that, because he's just one of the best in the business, no doubt about it. Very well respected. So hopefully he'll get an opportunity if it's the right fit for him and the Charlotte Hornets, but that would be an excellent choice.
That's absolutely facts. On the other end of the scale, a team that has experienced lots of success, unlike the Charlotte Hornets, the Golden State Warriors. Klay Thompson has said that he's open to a reduced role if it means staying with the Warriors for a longer time. He says, I'll be 35 next year, 35 coming off an ACL and Achilles tear, and still have the ability to be a really, really good player. Maybe not the guy who scored 60 and 3/4 and scored an NBA record 37 points in a quarter, but still a great threat. I modeled my game after Reggie Miller and Ray Allen, and those guys were incredibly effective until their late 30s. So I plan on kind of following that mold. So we're imagining a Ray Allen at the Miami Heat type Klay Thompson, which I think is fantastic news for the Warriors, who were a little worried that he's going to be commanding a max salary or whatever his demands may have been.
Who's this?
Klay Thompson.
Okay.
Klay Thompson wants to stay with the Warriors, even if it's a reduced role. So now, with them being a huge spender, as it is already, how does this help them? Because they're already at the second apron. So it's Klay's money coming off the books. They can't just go out and use that $30 million to go get new players, can they?
No, I believe so. It's so many rules. I don't have it there in front of me, but I will say this.
Or $43 million, sorry.
Yeah. I will say this. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch Klay, and where he kind of settles and fits in, because you have a couple things going here. One, you have a player who's been an all-star caliber player for many years. Clearly, what he's done speaks for itself. But what is this going to look like for him, and where will he settle? When I say settle, what's his market at this stage of his career? And a lot of times, there was some talk. I think he rejected, or it was at least reported that he was offered a contract earlier in the season and he turned it down. If that's a report. So we'll see how this plays out. Clearly, to have an opportunity, one of the things that very rarely do you see is a player will spend his entire career with an organization. And we'll see what direction that this Warriors team will go in. And financially, that'll play a part in their decision making. Clearly, what he's done there, they appreciate what he's done, and they'll look at that. But that's good to know, I think, from the Warrior standpoint. But at what cost? And that, to me, is going to probably be the deciding factor on whether he stays there or has to continue his career elsewhere. So it's a fascinating take by him, but I think it was very reflective. And to be able to be honest with yourself where you're at in your career at any given time. I mean, he's what, 34, 35 now?
35 next year.
Yeah. So that's I applaud players as they move on in their career, because the ball stopped bouncing for everyone. And for him to be able to say that, I think that was a big step.
Yep. Well, the Warriors, since Draymond Green has returned, have actually been playing really nice basketball. They're a team that I'm really keeping an eye on over in the Western Conference. They're 7-3 over the last 10, little 4-game win streak that they're on right now. But what I wanted to talk to you about today is the Cleveland Cavaliers. We talked about them a little bit yesterday with Scott as to why they weren't in our top fives. And I wanted to ask you this, BJ. They've had a really, really great run recently, a great winning streak. But when you look at the standings, currently they're second in the East. They just lost to the Sixers as we're recording this. They're 35-17. but they're 22-2 against teams below 500 and only 13-15 against teams above 500. And when you really look at that huge kind of winning streak where they only lost 1 or 2 games, the wins against the Clippers and the Bucks, I think they had 2 wins against the Bucks and 1 against the Clippers. They were the only really tough opponents that they faced. Look, the rest of it is Toronto, who are rebuilding, Brooklyn kind of in medium rebuild, Washington, Sacramento, I guess you could put as a good team. But then the Spurs, Memphis, Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago. Do you know what I mean? So when teams get hot like this in the regular season, how much does that kind of not just boost their confidence, but as a player, if you're running through some of the bottom feeder teams in the NBA, does that make it easier or harder when you come up against good opponents? Because you could kind of be overconfident now that you've won these 20 out of your last 23 games. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah. Well, the thing in the playoffs is when you're playing in the playoffs, you're playing against a team that's going to take away your first or second option, depending on how good they are once the playoffs begin. So, the first rule is beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Check for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have terrific talent. They will overwhelm you with their size and athletic ability if you allow them, especially with Mobley and those guys. And then they have a guard in Mitchell that can go out there and score at any given moment. Garland can do the same. So when you have this type of talent, you're going to win your fair share of games just because those guys are like all-star caliber players. Okay. Now the thing for them is what's going to happen when people start taking away your options? And that to me is going to be the question for them because last year they were rated or they were seated higher than the New York Knicks and the Knicks beat them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you have Jared Allen. Okay. Now you have these players here and you're saying, okay, you have Donovan Mitchell. Okay. At what point are you going to start looking around and saying, we have to be able to play and not just rely on our talent because you're going to need your talent. However, to win a series, now you got to start relying on all the other detailed things. And one of the detailed things is you got to learn how to win when you're not playing your best basketball because the other team is going to take away something. Now, this team right now is in the second, they're seeded second if the playoffs were to begin today. So we would at the very least expect this team to get to the second round. Okay. At the very least.
Yeah. You're the second seed right now. That's the standard.
Yes. So, but when you start playing against teams and they start taking away things, then you start seeing who this team really is. Now, like tonight, all right, every team loses games, right? And everyone is good. You hear me say that all the time. But I fully expected them to beat a team, the Philadelphia 76ers tonight.
Yeah.
Especially at home. Okay.
Yep.
And these are the things that concern me about Cleveland because you get excited about Cleveland and all of a sudden, all right, you lose a game like this on the road, you go, okay, but you're losing a game like this at home and you're fully healthy. And they got Buddy Hield who just came over there. I think this is his second game. I think Paul Reed, Kelly Oubre, Kenyon Martin, I believe, started, Tyrese Maxey. And then all of a sudden, Cameron Payne gets 15 points or so off the bench, and then they win the game. And you're going, wait a minute. You know what I mean? It's like little things like this.
And to be fair, the Sixers were up 10 with like 2 minutes left.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so there's things like this. The NBA is really good. However, as you start getting down the stretch and you start seeing teams begin to separate themselves, because it's been a fascinating year. We're at the All-Star weekend, and we're just starting to see teams begin to separate themselves. But most of it's been due to injury, not because one team is just separating. It's so it's been a kind of an odd year in that regard. But look, we all have bad losses. But you would think that there will be at this stage of the game a little bit more attention to detail, especially with Cleveland. And all games count. So this will probably sting a little bit more than others.
Well, right now, as we speak, the Denver Nuggets are down 20 points in Milwaukee against the Bucks. It looks like the Milwaukee Bucks heard they weren't in my top 5 yesterday and took that one a little bit personally. But this is what I mean about, things after the trade deadline taking a little bit of time to kind of go back to normal. Or should we be believing this and a team's showing who they can really be now that the finish line, so to speak, is in sight?
Yeah, like I said, well, it's all about matchups. It's just about taking care of the games you're supposed to take care of. You want to always defend home court. You want to be playing your best basketball when it counts. So, as much as I want to read into the regular season, a lot of times, Mo, it's just about being and playing against a team that you may play a well against for whatever the reason may be. So I don't want to put too much into it, but I will say this. You want to be as sharp as you can, and you want to be able to defend home court, because if you're coming into the playoffs and you lose that home court advantage, especially to a team that has the expectations to win, once that big momentum gets in the other team's locker room, Mo, and you have to sit in that city for 2 or 3 days and listen about how well the other team is playing after one game, Mo, it's a different response than if you lose, like, for instance, Cleveland lose tonight. Well, they just move on to the next game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you lose now. Philly beats you without Joel Embiid. You got to listen to the game 2 for like 3 or 4 days about, oh, Joel's coming back. Well, they beat him in the game 1 for sure. So you don't know how teams are going to react under that duress as well. So I don't want to read too much into it, but nice job by the Sixers. And you just want to be playing at least with the confidence that your team and your organization needs as you head into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the Mavericks put a beat down on the OKC Thunder on Sunday. Right now they're down significantly to the Wizards in the third quarter. So it's the regular season. There is one more thing I wanted to ask you about. Mark Stein said today that the Hawks could ultimately decide to keep Dejounte Murray and trade Trae Young this offseason instead. Of course, Dejounte Murray was in all of the trade rumors all year long. I like that move a lot. Now, I'm not got anything against Trae Young. I think he's a fantastic offensive talent. But if you're the Atlanta Hawks, what do you think of that move, BJ? If you had to pick one of them to stay on your team, which one would you have as your point guard?
Well, and this isn't, listen, I don't know. However, as you know what I like, I always build my team around defense, right? Defense wins. It doesn't matter about who our personal favorites are. If you want to win, well, you got to be able to defend. That's just there's no way to get around it. And you have to be able to defend, especially at that position, at the lead guard position. So if you're asking me, I don't have a problem saying that, if I look at it from the outside in, I'm going, okay, Dejounte Murray, I think, is a better defensive player. I don't think, you can make an argument however you want to make it. But
Trace has some really good clutch moments defensively, but it's a full 48 minutes out there.
And, and how you want to build your team. But that's just me. Now, when you start building a team, you have to take the good with some things, and there's no perfect player. And that's not to say one or another. But if you're asking me right now, this team has a lot of expectations. They have 2 players, right? Both of them have been all-stars. I think Trae Young is an all-star this year.
Yep.
We'll see him down in Indianapolis. So they have 2 all-star caliber guards. Clint Capella. They have some really good players. My question is, why isn't this team performing at a higher clip?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm not blaming either one of the players that we're currently discussing. But what I'm saying is this team, I mean, both of those guys are like on max deals or somewhere near it, right? Okay. So is it fair for us to say they should be in the playoffs? Where are they? What's their standing right now?
They're like 24 and 26 or something.
Okay. They are 10th right now.
Yeah. 24 and 29.
Something has to happen. Something has to happen there. And if they don't make the playoffs this year, I think you got to look to move one of them. I think that will be obvious in figuring out which direction you want to go in. And for me, if it comes down to how to build a team, I'm going to always choose that side of the game because defense just wins. It's just very simple. If you want to play a winning brand of basketball, you got to be able to play consistent on that end.
Well,
and that to me does it.
If Trae Young is moved, the team at the top of the list that everyone's talking about is the San Antonio Spurs. And BJ, let me read you this. The game between the Raptors and the Spurs just finished. I'm going to read you the stat line. 27 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 10 blocks. And of those 27 points, only 5 of them came from the free throw line. An efficient 10 of 14 from the field. Victor Wembanyama doing what he does best. He could easily just go through and grab triple doubles at this rate. He only played 29 minutes, which is a lot for him given his recent minutes restriction tonight in the game for San Antonio. How do you like that pairing of Trae and Victor? Because I think it's perfect for Trae Young's defensive liability to have a player like Victor on his team who can erase all of his mistakes. And then offensively, a point guard like Trae Young and Victor Wembanyama is a very, very dangerous combination.
Yeah, listen, I'm not worried about Victor, and I'm not worried about combinations, okay? I'm going to say this. When you are, it's one thing I've learned about playing with bigs. You have to put other big players around them. And the reason being is because Victor Wembanyama, if you're going to build a team around him, 2 things are absolutely necessary. 1, you better be a big team at every position. Okay? You better be a big team. Why? Is because your best player is big. Your best player is going to require you to do a couple things. I'm going to have to throw him the ball in the post at some point. Okay? When you have bigs, you normally play with big guards, right? Mm-hmm. You have Kareem and you'll have Magic. You have Kareem, you'll have Oscar Robertson. You have Shaq, you'll have Kobe. You always want to be big at your position. The reason being you want to be big at your position is because you want to be able to take advantage of the second thing that's absolutely necessary when you're playing with a Victor Wembanyama. You want to be able to switch. Okay, you want to be able to switch. Why? Because Victor Wembanyama's greatest asset as a player, if you're evaluating him, is his versatility. He's literally a 5, if so be it. He's a 4. He's a 3. I mean, I saw the guy do the sham guy. I'm just going to say he's everything. Like the guy has handles. He's nutmegging players during the course of a real game in the NBA. So if suddenly you're not able to switch and be versatile on the defensive end, to me, you're compromising his greatness. Now, that's just me, right? If you have a player with this level of versatility and you can't switch, now you just got to use him in a way where the only thing you can do is funnel the players to him. To me, it's limiting him and his ability. So Trae Young is a phenomenal player, phenomenal. However, when you're matching players, I like to take advantage of their natural gifts. A natural gift would be, let's get a big guard. Like, for instance, the guard I would love to see, if it were me, would be a player like Amen Thompson.
Mm-hmm. The defense would be scary.
I want to be big. I want to be big at why? Because I would imagine in the Western Conference, you're going to see Shea Alexander at some point.
Yep. Luka Doncic.
You're okay. Now you're talking to me. See, I'm trying to win. Now, nothing against the other players. However, those guys are just big.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now if you give me Amen Thompson, I'm just using him with his size, I can match up with Jamal Murray now. I can match up with Shea Alexander. I'm not saying I can stop these guys. I can match up with Luka Doncic. I can match up with De'Aaron Fox. I can match up with Ja Morant. It's all about the matchups for me. So I would take that into consideration. However, if you just look at the stats and offensively and alley-oops, yeah, I'm not arguing that. But when you get down to the playoffs, Mo, which we always talk about, what's going to happen in the playoffs? And suddenly LeBron has been playing the point guard position for a large portion of the year. D'Lo is now playing it. Size matters, especially when you start getting to that, to that level. Someone's got to guard these guys. So I would take that into consideration. However, that's just my philosophy. And if you're going to play in today's game, you have to be able to switch because of the isolation basketball that these players play. And I'll give it a prime example. It's going to be interesting to see the Conley-Rudy Gobert combination once the playoffs begin. Rudy Gobert in the regular season, you can funnel everything to him, da-da-da. Okay? But I remember when they were the first seed and they were knocked out because of what I'm saying. And that, to me, and as great of a defensive player, this guy is defensive player of the year. A couple times. I think that's something you have to consider as you're making these decisions. And maybe they can figure it out. And I'm not saying they can't, but it's just something to consider as you're trying to build your team.
Yep. No, I hear it. It does make sense. It does make sense. But that's another episode of the Hoop Genius podcast. Make sure you subscribe. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. We'll be back tomorrow with another one. We appreciate you all tuning in. If you're not in the Discord yet, make sure you get in the Discord too. That's linked below in the description. And until next time, get buckets.